Microsoft Ignite. My name is Jeff Margulies, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Saviynt. Welcome to our session on the importance of convergence in today's risky landscape. Let me bring into the conversation Amit. Amit, will you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, this is Amit Saha, CEO with Saviynt. I have been in the identity business for over a couple of decades now, and seen how identity has really evolved and transformed, and today has become the new perimeter when it comes to cybersecurity. So these are really exciting times for me being an identity practitioner, and again an excellent opportunity for all of us to understand how Microsoft and Saviynt are coming together to solve some of the pertinent identity and security challenges.
Thanks, Amit. So we titled this Today's Risky Landscape. Maybe expand a little bit more around what are some of the key risks that customers are facing that are relevant to this identity conversation.
Yeah, certainly, Jeff. I think in today's environment, like I said, identity has become the new perimeter. And I think it is absolutely relevant when it comes to, if you look at cloud. Today, infrastructure has become code. There is no longer firewall or any kind of a network boundary that distinguishes different set of controls that you might want to have internally versus different set of controls that you want to have externally. There is a lot of disappearing perimeter, and the only perimeter that really helps you understand how to tailor the right set of controls, where does your compliance start and end, and where do your privacy regulations start and end. Identity is the common denominator across the board. For example, in the DevOps world today, you have developers who used to traditionally be focused only on one aspect, that is building applications or building code, and then a completely different operations team who used to deploy that code. And there used to be complete segregation of duty in terms of how those changes were being made into the production environment. That has completely disappeared now with the DevOps world, where there is commingling of processes. There are same individuals who perform different type of activities at different points in time. Cloud is introducing a lot of elasticity from an infrastructure standpoint, where you need to react very quickly to the business requirements, and you have new infrastructure, new platforms, new services continuously being introduced in the IT environment. So a lot of change happening very quickly in the environment, and that in essence drives a lot of risk, because by the time an enterprise really understands what is the type of risk exposure to evaluate with a new service, a new process in their environment, the threat landscape has already evolved and they are already behind. So that's why, staying on top of what risk really means, how it conforms to the different types of processes, different types of workloads, different type of applications is very critical, especially when you are in the process of moving a lot of on-prem to cloud workloads and cloud applications. The very nature of you trying to stay afloat and current with your changing risk landscape has become very difficult. And on the other hand, as you introduce all these new changes in the environment, the bad guys are looking at new ways of how to probably take advantage of oversights when it comes to configuration of different applications and platforms. They are here to take advantage of some of the unknown aspects that enterprises are not looking into, especially in the nuances around how security needs to be looked at in the cloud era or in the digital transformation era, especially with exposing a lot of your so-called internal assets onto the cloud gives them more means and mechanisms to try to enter your environment and steal the information. It's not just the network, right? Today, even devices are absolutely vulnerable. They are vulnerable to malware, ransomware kind of attacks, where any of those attacks can be then used to drive lateral movement, lateral progression, and then get access to your critical crown jewel applications and platforms. So, the landscape is evolving very quickly. It is becoming more and more complex. And that's where I do believe that the ownership is on, or the onus is on vendors like Saviynt and Microsoft to really bring in the right tools, right technologies with the right balance of how easy it should be to implement and consume within the enterprise to help manage the risk.
So clearly, Microsoft has made a lot of investment in the cloud, a lot of investment in security. Talk a little bit about why Microsoft from a partnership perspective.
Yeah, so Microsoft started off, first of all, with a huge lead as compared to any other vendor, where Active Directory is and continues to be the single biggest identity store within an enterprise, especially for the workforce identities. And when the time came for Microsoft to look at Azure and bring Azure as an IaaS or the next generation data center for all enterprises, security was not an afterthought for Microsoft, right? So they really looked at how to relook at Active Directory, bring its new iteration, which is the Azure Active Directory from a cloud native standpoint, and then bring a complete ecosystem of tools and technologies that are centered around Azure Active Directory. So whether it is a device level security or a network level security, or getting into some of the SIM and other platforms, Microsoft looked at security in a very holistic fashion, and all built on cloud native technologies, which allow an enterprise to scale their investments onto the security platform. It gives them more predictability. It allows them to evolve or bring their evolving needs onto the security platform and apply it on the Microsoft technologies. So when we looked at all those great points in terms of how Microsoft was approaching this, from a cloud native approach, from a low code, no code approach, from an infinite scalability standpoint, those were some of the tenets that we also subscribe to. And that's where the partnership was very logical for us to look at, where Savient took a very similar approach to bringing its next generation governance solutions, apply it consistently across different types of identity governance requirements, whether it is a human identity, machine identity, whether it is a workforce identity or a privileged access. We wanted to bring in some of those similar concepts and techniques. And that's where I feel it was a very logical progression in terms of our relationship to bring synergies across our different product offerings and take it to the market.
So customers are going through not just this cloud transformation, but then fundamentally a digital transformation of their business, where they're systematically walking across all areas of their business and looking at how can technology improve the processes, improve their productivity of their workforce, be better for their end users. How does Microsoft play into that digital transformation journey, and then how do we align that as Savient?
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. And I think, more than digital transformation, I feel it's more around business transformation, because today, the type of adversities that any business is trying to cope up with, whether it is intense competition, new players coming in with radical thoughts, or the pandemic that hit enterprises very negatively and they had to evolve their business very quickly, or with the whole movement towards green technologies, enterprises are going through a massive change, and all of this change has to be enacted over the course of next decade or so. So that's very quick in terms of how organizations need to evolve. And I do believe the technologies that Microsoft brings to the table really add a lot of value in terms of understanding the nuances around each of those imperatives as it impacts to the identity and cybersecurity programs, and then offering up those nuanced use cases and solutions for each of those different type of use cases. So case in point, if you look at a workforce identity's top priorities, what they are looking for is, how can you onboard a user very quickly into the enterprise environment, and how quickly can you give them the right access to the appropriate applications and systems day one, so that you have minimal or no loss in productivity from that workforce. So efficiency is very key there. Or when you are looking at opening up some of your internal systems out to your suppliers or B2B users, you want to again ensure that there is a mechanism for, first of all, for you to onboard those users and then give them the appropriate access, as well as review their access on a continuous basis. Because supplier access has been one of those elements in an enterprise today, which has been one of those loopholes or gaps in the cybersecurity posture that hackers have been able to exploit and make inroads into enterprise assets. So as different types of identities are trying to access different applications and platforms, it is very important for us to understand and appreciate all the different nuances and bring the right set of technologies for those type of users. And I think Microsoft has done a very admirable job from that standpoint, and Savient has been able to partner and deliver and really build an end-to-end identity and cybersecurity platform along with Microsoft. So things like where you have Azure Active Directory that meets your workforce IAM needs. On the other hand, you have the Azure AD B2B, which helps cater to your supplier access, right? So there are different types of tools or different flavors of the same tools that are being made available to enterprises so that they can select the right combination that meets their business requirements and the priorities and bring them to the forefront.
So you've been in this industry for 20 years. I've been in this industry for 20 years. This is not the first time that enterprises are deploying identity and access management tools, capabilities. Why can't they use their current set of tools? Why is now the time that so many organizations are looking to replace their stack with a new one?
No, that's a great question, Jeff. So if you look at the traditional IAM landscape, by the very nature of those technologies, they are very integration heavy. What it means is your SSO solution needs to integrate with all types of on-prem applications as well as SaaS applications. The same thing goes to your governance solutions, whether it is the IGA or the PAM products. You need to be able to integrate with different type of Windows, Unix boxes on-prem, or it could be infrastructure workloads on the cloud. Again, integration is very key as part of the IAM implementation. That has been an instrumental factor in terms of how or why organizations have struggled in the traditional IAM stack. Primarily because, first of all, it is on-prem and you are spending cycles trying to deploy an IAM platform on-prem. Then you have to have the team that has to be made available to support that platform. And it's not easy to keep that platform up to date and ensure that they have the right APIs, right integrations, as all your managed applications keep changing and they keep updating and refreshing their interfaces at every point in time. So it needs a lot more care and feed than the return from a value perspective. And that's where organizations have been very hesitant in terms of really investing and scaling up their traditional IAM platforms, because over a period of time, it just becomes too intensive for an enterprise to keep sustaining it and making it and ensuring that it is current. And that's where I think the fresh approach when it comes to building a cloud native IAM platform is very key, because first of all, it ensures that the enterprise is not really worried about supporting that platform and infrastructure, but rather the onus is on providers like Microsoft and Savient to ensure that the platform is always current. We maintain all the integrations with different on-prem and SaaS providers in a consistent manner. And where the enterprise really can then double down and focus on is defining and implementing the right set of governance processes, right set of compliance processes, deriving the benefits of when it comes to automating a lot of those compliance processes, a lot of the security process, and ensuring that they are able to maintain their cybersecurity posture. So I think it just focuses them in the right mindset by having a platform or set of SaaS platforms that they can rely and trust on, and they can be more focused on understanding their business, interpreting the compliance and the security implications on their business, and then using our technologies to automate and enforce those processes.
So that sounds like what we call convergence, right? The converged identity, converged security solution between the Savient converged identity governance, privileged access, application access governance, all of the capabilities that we've converged onto a platform with what Microsoft has converged onto a platform around Azure Active Directory for access and single sign-on, Azure B2B, permissions management with the CloudKnox acquisition, those sort of convergence together, as well as Sentinel, Defender, and the other security capabilities that Microsoft has. So we've converged those together. How does that benefit the end user? as they interact with a converged identity or converged security solution.
No, absolutely. You are spot on, Jeff. For us, convergence is a multidimensional aspect here. There is convergence at the identity and the security data level. There is convergence between all these adjacencies that have been traditionally looked at in the market as standalone tools. And enterprises are deriving or seeing a lot of benefit by driving that convergence. And last but not the least, from an end user perspective, I think that convergence is even more pronounced, especially because familiarity goes a long way in reducing the burden of governance for end users, because IAM is pretty much something that is exposed to each and every end user, whether it is a workforce identity, supply chain user, or your DevOps community. All of them interact with the IAM tools and technologies at any given point in time, and ensuring that we cater to their experience in a meaningful manner that also helps you improve the security compliance posture is very important. And that's where we are talking about user experience and not just a UI. I think that appreciation is very critical when we are talking about humans who want to interact with the traditional channels. How do you ensure that if you are submitting a request in Azure AD or the Azure AD PIM, for example, you are submitting a privileged access, how does that as a channel remain consistent, remain familiar to you? But some of the backend systems, when it comes to provisioning or deprovisioning access to both on-prem and cloud assets, or doing the just-in-time, just enough access, those are all the backend systems that are managed seamlessly for them. That familiarity of that interface is very important for them. Then ensuring that you strive for driving better intelligence across all those interactions is also very critical, wherein you are relying on AI ML to identify what should be the right level of access a person should have access to, or what is the right level of activity that they are supposed to perform before it crosses the threshold and then is deemed as risky or malicious activity. As we rely more on those AI ML techniques, again, bringing those in a very simplistic, intuitive manner through that user experience is very critical. And I think thinking of convergence right from the onset, where you are not just having a web interface, but you could also have a device as an interface where that the end user is interacting with, and ensuring that you are consistently bringing in those AI ML recommendations and using that to improve the response from the end user is very critical to both improving the cybersecurity posture as well as simplifying or accelerating the adoption, so that governance or security is not a detriment to them. It's not a burden on them. Rather, they openly and embrace it.
So it sounds like if the user is commonly the weakest link in our security chain, by putting the right information in front of them at the right time, on the right device, in a way that they can consume and make better decisions about things that impact the risk of their employers, of the enterprise, that is a key to having an efficient and as low risk as possible way for getting access and continuing to have the right level of access. That makes a lot of sense. And so I can see how that benefits the security team as well. Any other thoughts on benefits to the CISO and the security organization for a converged identity and converged security solution between Saviynt and Microsoft?
I would say a CISO's job today is more difficult and more complex than ever, especially when they are dealing with a lot of point solutions, and then the ownership is on them to implement and integrate all these different technologies together. So CISOs, I believe, go a long way in appreciating out-of-box integration between all the different security providers here. And that's where you will see analysts come up with new terminologies, which is something like cybersecurity mesh, where they do expect all the leading vendors like Microsoft and Saviynt to contribute their aspect of the risk context, the identity context, the device and the network context, put all of that together and really help understanding what is the kind of risk exposure, how much amount of control or how much granularity of control needs to be exerted because all of that really costs a lot of money for the CISO, and the CISO is trying to balance security with a limited budget. So I do believe a lot of this integration and the convergence between all the security providers go a long way in terms of giving confidence to the CISO that they are not spending cycles trying to integrate things. They are leaving it to the experts from our industry to figure out what is the right level of integration, right level of information exchange that needs to be done between the different providers. And they are focused more on how do you refine your AI ML engine to your business requirements? How do you tailor those recommendations and providing that to the security analyst or to the end user so that they are taking more informed decisions rather than worrying about the technical aspects of putting multiple technologies together. And that essentially allows them to bring in a more balanced approach towards security, identity, and compliance versus balancing out the cost.
Thanks. So I think ultimately, if we can do more with less, be better, faster, and cheaper, I think that's the goal of converged identity. I think we've used up our time here. Amit, thank you very much for joining us and sharing all of this information. I think this is great, and thank you for everyone for joining this session on converged identity. We really appreciate you spending this time with us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff, and everyone have a nice day.